From years of anxiety to warrior and mentor, Bradley Robinson created the Anxiety Project to help you end your anxiety naturally. Let's mold the new you and let's end anxiety together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Anxiety Project podcast. Welcome to 303. I am Brad Robinson. I am really excited about this one. I was really looking forward to this episode today because I'm talking about a really deep and common question in today's society. How does one get rid of negative thinking, catastrophizing, investing in imagistic representations of what's lurking in the unknown, especially at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, right? There's these thoughts that are playing out. We invest in them. We feel the negative emotions and we feel like, well, I'm a bad person for thinking such a thing. And I mean, like, not just the worst case scenarios extending themselves into the future. I'm talking about those evil, malevolent, bitter thoughts that we all have access to. And why is that? Well, Carl Jung talked about the shadow. Now, that's the dark side of the psyche we don't want to acknowledge. I'm a good person. I'm not that evil person. But that evil spirit is lurking in the heart of every human being on the planet. Now, these negative thoughts, catastrophizing, are all tendrils coming out from the shadow part of the psyche. Oh, why did I think that thought about my baby, my child, or doing that to somebody? I must be a bad person. So we're going to dive into that and why that negative emotion associated to the thought is a sign that, well, this is something you don't want to attend to, but maybe you should acknowledge this. And how do you even acknowledge this? Because that's the key here in today's episode, is letting it go and not investing in those negative thoughts. Now, I want to begin with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. He says, "Begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with indifference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to the offender's ignorance of what is good or evil." It's a great thing to do because living in comfort, we can be naive. We can assume everyone is good and is looking out for you. And then we come across someone malevolent and it flattens you and you don't know what to do about it because you were under the assumption that everyone is good. How could someone do that to me? I'm a good person and I thought everyone had good intentions. But it's not just acknowledging. I love that Marcus Aurelius said this because it's so true that we're walking out the door into a world that can be unpredictable. We do what we can. That's the existential concern, is we buttress ourselves as much as we can from the unknown of the world with our homes and our jobs and relationships and our materialistic goods and possessions. But there's a random element to life. And then when that random element actually pops up, it shocks us. And we question, well, our competence, because that randomness is testing our tolerance levels all the time. But, at the same time as what Marcus Aurelius is saying, acknowledging these people, but also at the same time, is it not your ignorance of good and evil within your own heart that's important as well, right? That if you're not oriented properly, you can fall prey to internal drives inside and that runs you. It runs you into really dark places. There is deception and malevolence within your own heart. And if you can't trust your own self, which I was in that boat, I couldn't trust myself, and then I didn't trust other people. Like, how can you trust others as well? So I certainly reacted to the irrational, catastrophic thinking mind regularly, believing in its message. There was no separation between the ego and thought. I produced the thought, that must make me a bad person. Now, this is really important because I perceived the thought as being me. That's me. I thought that. As Jung pointed out, our thoughts have a mind of their own. They can be reflexive in nature, and the mind does its best to formulate a landscape of the unknown, right? So you're in a situation where that's testing your tolerance, right? And the mind is producing a lot of negative thoughts, maybe anger towards somebody, maybe anger towards yourself, maybe thoughts pertaining to your own inadequacies. And that is making you fall short and quit. And so you are a human being. You are a human being. So you have this awareness of nakedness. Because, like I was saying earlier, we're living in a landscape of uncertainty. We do what we can to buttress ourselves and wall off ourselves from the uncertainty, but it'll always creep in. And then once that uncertainty creeps in, it opens our eyes to our own inadequacies because we are now testing our own competence dealing with that uncertainty. And so when comfort slips away and desires are not being met, we are aware of this uncertain terrain. And are we not aware of our own capacity for good and evil within us? Certainly. Certainly, we can be. When you are holding a baby, and this is something I learned from listening to Russell Brand, when you're holding a baby and you imagine yourself throwing or dropping the baby, well, that's terrifying. You think you're a bad person. It shocked me when I thought that, and it still does to this day, but I'll tell you how to get over that shock and into, well, awareness, but more so letting go of that emotion. So the thought of throwing the baby is reflexive and it produces a burst of negative emotion. And so what's going on here with this burst of negative emotion? Because you thought it, there's this image of you throwing, doing something terrible. Then there's this negative emotion. What is that? Are you a terrible person for even imagining such a thing? And should you beat yourself up over it? Now, what's interesting is the mind is producing a scenario that's not real. It's not reality. It's an avatar of you doing something. So is that not useful for you to play out a scenario where, there's steps or there's things around you that are dangerous and you imagine something bad happening? Is this not a message, is there not a deeper meaning here? And the meaning is, well, you should be cautious. You should be overly aware that you're holding something valuable and that you should be on your guard and not distracted. You should not be in a drunken stupor, or you should maybe get more sleep or whatever it is, right? Like the final message here is, well, here's this scenario where you could do this terrible thing, and they're bang, negative emotion. Okay, well, the meaning of this is, well, how not to do this? Watch out. How can I prevent this? But we take it at face value. We go, oh, I'm a bad person for thinking that. It's like, no, the mind is just telling you something profound. It's just generating a scenario of something lurking in the unknown. That's possible. That's possible. Now, as Dr. Aldo Pucci puts it in his book, Feel the Way You Want to Feel, No Matter What, the ABCs of emotions are awareness, and then your belief about the thing that you're aware of, and C, how you felt, how you feel about it. So you're aware of the thought, you believe you're a bad person, and then what you feel is, well, you're sitting in a pool of anxiety. You're sitting in negative emotion. And so a reflexive thought is skipping from A to C without knowing your belief about it, without the rational element. It's a jumping to conclusions. That's what a reflexive thought is. It's a jumping to conclusions. Now we can unravel what the belief is so that it can help you release, well, the negative emotion associated to it. And so Dr. Aldo Pucci says to ask yourself this important question: I'm acting as if I believe what about the situation? I'm acting as if I believe what about the situation? And so this reveals the belief behind the thought. Then I tell you to, well, ask yourself this even bigger question is, do I really want this? So you have a thought about someone dying, right? And then I get a burst of negative emotion and I'm like, oh my God, do I really believe that? You have to question. That's why these questions are so important. You have to ask yourself this, because you're just going to buy into the fact that, oh yeah, this is me. I thought this thought. I'm a bad person, right? You're just going to go to the highest level of abstraction. You don't want to do that. You have to ask yourself on a micro level basic questions. Do I really want this of my family member? And then when I ask myself this, there's this voice that goes, oh, of course not. I love them. So there's the truth. You just unraveled the truth. It just takes a question to do that. And so that's a huge relief. That voice is the truth. So why do we believe so much in the original thought that produced this negative emotion? Because the ego couldn't separate the thought as something separate from the self. The mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. Throwing the baby, you are aware of this shadow, evil side of the psyche, that this is something you could do, right? We do have free will. Now, what's stopping you? Because someone who does something like that does it unconsciously, does it sporadically, without thinking. But here you are thinking about doing something. You're running this movie in your head, this scenario, and you're not acting on it. So what's happening here? Well, there's a freezing response, right? The negative emotion is producing a freezing response. What do you do when you're in a landscape of uncertainty, in the landscape of the unknown? You freeze. You're a frightened rabbit, right? Freeze, emotion, imagine, right? It's a freezing response. That's why the thought makes you feel frozen for a moment. You're sitting there, you feel frozen. And instead of snowballing that imagination, ask yourself the basic question, do I really want this? Or or I would say question it more so if if there's a tricky scenario that's playing itself out in your mind's eye, ask yourself, what's the meaning behind this? Or how can I prevent this from happening? Or just tell yourself, this is just my unconscious mind making me aware of the potential dangers lurking ahead of me. I think that's it, right? That's it. Now, what's stopping you from throwing that baby, right? What's stopping you? Well, we already said you froze, right? And with negative emotion, and it's your willingness to control that side of yourself that wants power, novelty, hedonism, right? It's this control, right? What is that? This morality lurking within you. It's this control. If you think about cheating and you decide not to cheat on your partner, to be specific, there is an underlying narrative, there's an underlying story to that choice, right? It's not worth confronting all those snakes for a moment of fleeting satisfaction because you know there's all of these snakes lurking in the future. It's the sacrifice of short term impulse for long term game. Also, deeper than that, the malevolent and tyrannical spirit of that act will flourish within you, and the hell that accompanies it is certainly not worth it. And some people cheat because they unconsciously want to get out of a relationship and they're just too afraid to confront that reality. That's another truth. So, letting go of thoughts rather than entertaining them is very important for their repetition. To let them go requires exploration, especially if they are repeated thoughts, because they indicate significance. If they continue to repeat, right? If you give a thought more than 10, 15 seconds and you invest in the movie and the weight of the thought, it's going to stick around because the unconscious mind is going, okay, this is of importance. What you pay attention to the most determines what you value. Oh, this is important. Now we got to keep this close because we got to figure out how to prevent this from happening. Or we have to understand why this is even lurking in the mind here, right now, in the first place. And so if you catch yourself fortune telling, narrativizing something that hasn't even happened, here's some great tips for you. View them as useful narratives, that it's telling you something for a reason. It's telling you something for a reason. And prepare more for the worry that accompanies it, right? If there's a job interview coming up, maybe you should prepare more. Maybe you're not feeling comfortable enough. The thought holds information that needs to be integrated. I'm thinking about cheating with my partner. Perhaps there is a lack of connection in the relationship and that needs to be improved. You're bored and looking for novelty. You're feeling insecure. If you give the thoughts attention and invest in the fantasy, then it will move you towards its message in reality. In reality as well. For me, to maintain this orientation towards a higher self, I have to surround myself with my role models regularly because I'm very tempted by hedonism and it's lurking around every corner. And so I have to surround myself with people that are absent from the pleasures and desires I want to seek out to numb, soothe, and distract me from the boredom, the reality of existence. And so I need to buttress myself in this world of, well, powerful people who have control over their internal drives. And that's unbelievably important for me. So another thing about negative thinking that I want to talk about before I conclude this episode is, if you have a poor routine, if you have poor sleep, if you have poor eating, this can snowball negative thinking and depression. Very important. And so ask yourself, do I really want this? When a negative thought comes in, when it's something about you doing something really evil and malevolent, do I really want it? And, especially around things like your family, right? And it seems kind of obvious, self-evident that, oh, no, I don't want it. But in those moments, you can't separate the ego from the thought. So I always ask yourself that. And if it is something that you want, maybe you have to dive a little bit deeper into that aggressive side of yourself. You have to look into the shadow elements of you, and when the more you explore that side of yourself, the more you will realize that, yeah, you're capable of very dark things. And in Harry Potter, I love this part in book 5, I believe, when he's with his godfather. In book 5, man, Harry's having a very difficult time. He's having nightmares about being Voldemort's snake, because he has a piece of Voldemort within him, right? Ever since he was given the scar and his parents were murdered by him when he was a baby. And that's so interesting because everybody has a piece of evil within them. And that's just archetypal. It's an archetype. And so Harry has a piece of evil, and as he's growing throughout the books, the evil is becoming more sophisticated, more pronounced within him. And as the books progress, the evil continues to grow, and the evil grows. And Harry is well aware now in book 5 that he's very close to darkness, and it's the choices that he makes that will determine his future. Are you going to act on these evil things? And Sirius pointed out, these are dreams, Harry. These are dreams, and it's your actions that define you. It's the choices that you make. It's one thing to think about that evil act, but it's another it's your choice to walk down that avenue. And Voldemort certainly walked down that avenue, and each step he took, a little piece of his soul deteriorated until now he's a shell of a human being. I mean, he literally turns into a snake by the end of the series, man. Like he's it's just evil, right? He's not even scary. I feel like Professor, or yeah, Umbridge. Umbridge is insanely annoying and scary. Way worse than Voldemort, in my opinion. Voldemort is understandable to why he's doing what he does, because he's literally a snake, right? Like he has no soul within him. Umbridge is more human, and that's scarier. That's way scarier. And the reason why it's scarier is because that's malevolence, man. And that's ideology. And man, that's why I love those books. They're deep, they're inexhaustible in their meaning. And so Harry has to learn to wrestle with good and evil, as we all do. As we all do. So I hope that this podcast has helped you in some way, has given you ideas and a strategy moving forward to deal with negative thinking. Thank you for being here with me today. God bless you, and I will see you on the next podcast episode. Bye for now. My anxiety recovery program is available over at unpluganxiety.com. With the Know Your Brain audiobook, you will learn about the inner workings of your anxiety system. This will help you to better understand why you feel detached and out of control from this ancient brain structure. That's at unpluganxiety.com. Go there to learn more.